Welcome to Expedition Self on OMTimes Radio with lifelong learner, entrepreneur, and creator of the worlds of Expedition Self, Sam Parrotto. Sam shares 4 decades of studying, guiding, and teaching how to go inside so we can build an incredibly powerful, dynamic, and validating relationship with the self. Expedition Self is laced with stellar, unexpected insights about what it means to be human. Expedition Self is a masterful, inclusive, transparent, and down-to-earth on-air conversation that invites you to seek real-time answers to your real-life exploration while gaining command around the language, the interrelationship, and the ways of being so critical to evolving and creating your most fulfilled life. Listen now and ignite your self-development process with Sam Parrotto.
Well, hello and welcome to my show. I'm Sam, and I want to thank you very much for tuning in. I'm aware that there's so much going on in the world right now, and it's attention spread thin, right? Both from the inside of what you're dealing with and also from the outside. So even though I can't see you directly or watch your reactions, I am imagining when I'm sitting over here that I can feel and sense the idea that we're occupying this listening and talking space at the very same time. Of course, I don't have to imagine it if you call in and actually talk to me. So that's my first plug for calling in and sharing some conversation with me on the show today. And it's kind of random, but do you ever try to picture what someone's doing in the very moment that you're doing something also? I find my mind will go here when I think of something. I like to actually picture it like I'm eating a sandwich and they're making their bed, or it seems really silly, or I'm driving down the highway looking at a car in front of me and they're in some intense meeting in their life. I don't know. It's an odd thing to think that everyone is doing something while I'm also doing something on this plane of existence. So, okay. So anyway, for those of you who are with me now, this is a very cool shared experience we're having. And I don't know, I thought I might give you a visual of me while I'm doing it so that you can actually get a sense of what I'm doing and maybe that'll us just connect and stay in one space together. So I'm wearing a blue-green sweater for St. Patty's Day today. I have a purple thermos. By the way, purple is my most favoriteest color of all time. And it's filled with water, just plain old water that I drink at break. And I wear royal blue headphones. And I always take off my earrings, which I wear all the time because they hurt my ears, and like to have sore ears while I'm trying to actually talk about growth with you here. So, all right, that's me. Here we are on with the show. So today we're talking about 2 things: the 5 essential needs of being human, and my personal mantra: I have value simply because I breathe. I have to say I was super excited to talk about this subject last week. And, I'm oh my gosh, this is what we're doing next week, until I started working on my notes on Sunday. And then I thought, oh my, I have bitten way more than I can do in an hour. And so rather than break each of the needs down in detail like I was going to do, I kind of had to punt here. And so we're going to talk primarily about the need of feeling valuable. And although I'm going to touch on 5 essential needs, we're probably not going to go into a deep dive into those today. I have to tell you, I think I have 80 pages of notes, and I know we can't get through pages in the time we have allotted, especially when you call into 202-570-7057. So hopefully when we're done, you'll walk away having a better sense of your need to be valued, and you'll also say, I never thought about it like this before, which is always one of my goals. I'm always trying to find ways to bring more natural outflow of our talents. I think, we're on the planet. We have these gifts and this opportunity to express these gifts. And so anything that I can do to help clear the way for that, it's important. To find ways to get unencumbered by the unconscious motives that keep us tethered to patterns and habits and repetitive ways of doing. I think we should all have an opportunity to simply allow life to flow through us, and then we can show up to bring it into full view. To me, this is what a fulfilling life is all about, that depth and expression and the intimacy with the self. So as a result, this idea of needs and how they feed our sense of value is at the center of my life's mission as a way of getting into that flow I'm talking about. I think it's serious business because these needs are a huge part of what we feel tethered by. It's also one of those subjects that's hard to describe because each thought keeps unfolding into the next thought until the spot where you're supposed to be spending more time is finally revealed. So the challenge today will be to really stay with it and see if you can find that spot in yourself, the one that would offer up some movement, some freedom, some opportunity for your next level of growth. It's the place where your psyche would land and say, hey, this was meaningful to me. So, as always, I'm inviting you to be one of my callers and help color up the conversation. Remember, your personal experience interwoven with the concepts I'm sharing make it so much more interesting and inspiring. And I have to imagine it helps you see the place where you might find your own opportunity for growth. So I normally do a poem at the end, which I actually have for today, but I wanted to start off with this one from Alex L. And a couple of questions. So here's the short poem. Who taught you to unlove yourself so sweetly that you actually thought it tasted good? So here's the questions. Do you question whether you're making a big enough contribution in life? Do you get frustrated when you have a sense that you're not being valued and seen as essential by others? And do you wonder, explore your own sense of worth? Somewhere along the way through both my journey and others, I realized that I was trying to find valid reasons to justify my worth or feel special or useful. And the more I whittled it down, I finally realized there was absolutely no good reason to feel valued because I didn't need one. Even if you've lived long enough to feel satisfied with how accomplished and capable you are and how you've crafted ways of being to feel valuable and good about yourself, most of us don't fully understand the framework that caused us to want to get to that to begin with. The truth is, most of us don't live with the knowledge that our innate self-esteem isn't tied to any act or any skill or any specialness. We don't realize that self-value can only be tied, I'm taking a breath here, to the unchangeable reality that accompanies the moment of your birth, when you came into existence. If we did understand, and we got this, we wouldn't spend our lifetimes trying to identify solid, provable data and reasons for why we're valuable and deserving. I'm good at this. I'm accomplished at that. People like me because of this. It goes on and on. But it doesn't even stop there because we then conspire with others by promoting and exhibiting these good reasons, reinforcing why they should also value us. Selling ourselves on these very bits of self-value generate proof, hoping for validation and credible evidence that will result from our actions. So while this oh-so-human process is impossible to stop, it is super helpful to realize that our freedom to be is locked up inside of this very pattern unless we get super conscious about it. It as a heady, liberating place to come from, though even if you can just get a small glimpse into being free of needing to be or do specific things in order to reap self-value. Be free, I say. Yes, that's the goal. So the more conscious you become, the more freedom and clear-sighted you have. You become more clear-sighted to detach your actions from needing to fill these imaginary self-wealth buckets. I really like that word, self-wealth. So when you do this, you're really in that student zone. You're experimenting, you're being creative, you're learning, and rather than trying, maneuvering, and operating from this lack of awareness within the self. But why don't we come from this place? The concept and deep understanding that our value was fused into our bones and our muscles and our nervous system quite naturally at the moment we took our first breath. Well, so let's reach back into the past in your life and bring the story forward, because the past and the present and the future in the brain and in the cells of the body are all one. I think we live with some sense of time, a way for us to kind of make sense of life, but I don't think the body and the mind and the heart really does. A lot of answers about what there is to get conscious about can be found in the past and how things got wired up in your brain. So every time some action was touted as positive, you collected it. And with every interaction, when something went the way you wanted it to go, you turned that into part of the formula. And every time things didn't go the way you wanted, you registered that too. And you had tons of help. People trying to shape and guide you and helping you acclimate to the social culture of your family and your community, and you trying to belong and find your place and get the attention, well, dare I say, that you needed. It's no surprise we got confused along the way because of all of these external influencers and our own undistinguished, undetermined human needs. I think all of those things had something to do with how we started to believe that our value was based on some talent or some gift or some set of actions or behaviors, rather than the idea that we had value simply because we exist. So consider that your life is spent trying to fill a bucket of things that make you feel valuable or necessary. And I'm suggesting that you're not filling a bucket, you're also compensating for what you think isn't valuable about yourself. That wiring that I was talking about. And so let me throw out a few examples, because I've heard people share a bunch of these. It's important to be considerate. Therefore, any part of me that's selfish isn't a good thing. I even have a number of stories from family time that reinforced why this matters. Or, being smart or creative is something people always noted about me. But then what happens when I don't think I'm being smart or creative? And I even remember how I lost out on something that really mattered to me when I wasn't the smartest one in the room. Okay, I think I have one more here. Everyone always acknowledged me for how giving and generous I was. But what happens when I don't want to share? How am I supposed to feel good about myself then? So if you decide that something about you is valuable, where does it leave the thing you have discarded that's not as valuable? How do you get to feel valuable then? This is one of the things I'd love to have you call in about, which is, what did you end up deciding gives you value? If you're willing to share, I'd love to hear it. All right, so by separating what isn't valuable in an attempt to distinguish what is, you're splitting yourself into parts. And those parts left unconnected, well, leave you less whole and, oddly enough, less able to feel your intrinsic value. That value that I'm talking about just because you breathe. So your bucket, therefore, has things being put in it and taken out of it constantly. Accomplish some big project, then realize you didn't budget for it properly. Win the writing contest, but then not get the job you were wanting. Have a loving moment with your brother, and get into a conflict with them. See, we're internalizing these things all of the time, and they have everything to do what we value about ourselves, how we feed that sense of value, and then what happens next. I'm saying it's fleeting and fleeting, this process of searching for value. It's truly an unwinnable game. But it's an interesting thought, right? We humans have to do these unwinnable things until we realize they're not getting us where we thought they were. It's how we learn. In fact, it's kind of how I learned this. And it's what I like to think that all of us are trying to learn to debunk. So that's how my mantra came to be. I realized that I was destining myself to maintaining a lifelong scorecard. And although I gained some permanent ground, 75% of it was defined by putting it in or building up and then taking out and feeling less. So in contrast, though, consider that the very idea that everything you are is valuable. It means you can do and explore anything you are interested in or intrigued by without any meaning having to be attached to it. Okay, on that note, I think we're going to go to break here. I want to give you the phone number again. I'm hoping stuff's getting stirred up over there. Like, where do you get your value? How do you work with it? What about that filling it and not? And the idea of having value simply because you breathe. Here's the number, 202-570-707.
A conscious lifestyle for a mindful life. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Came across someone struggling with hunger. How would you recognize them?
By their clothes,
their age,
the way they speak.
Hunger can be hard to recognize. Learn why at IamHungerInAmerica.org. Brought to you by Feeding America, 200 Food Banks Strong, and the Ad Council.
OMTimes magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organisation, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. Connect at omtimes.com. OMTimes, creating a more conscious lifestyle.
My name is Victor Furman. Some call me the Voice. I've always been fascinated with human nature, spirituality, science, and the crossroads at which they meet. Join me Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio, and we'll explore these topics and so much more on Destination Unlimited.
If you're worried your friend may be struggling, remember, you don't have to be there to be there.
You can say, how are you, or get a fake tattoo. You can ask with an app if it works for you. You could chat on the game, kick off your flip-flops. You can ask on your couch while you binge watch. Whatever gets you talking.
Reach out to a friend about their mental health. Learn how you can help at seizetheawkward.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council, American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, and the JED Foundation.
So I'm Sam Parrotto, and for those of you who are joining us, this is Expedition Self, and we're talking about our need to be valued today and this idea that we have value simply because we breathe. So here's the big sentence we're going to start out with, which is you are allowed to be whatever it is you want to be without having to fulfill some particular expectation. It doesn't matter whether you're good at it. What matters is that you're drawn towards it, that it delights you, it entices you, it pulls you towards it because it's something that you just have an interest in. Like even things that seem mundane or unimportant, or the opposite of what you concluded along the way that makes you feel valuable, are really still completely open for your engagement. And when they don't go well, you don't have to take something out of the bucket because you're now basing your idea of self-value on being in life, not trying to prove how valuable you are. So think about how you do things that make you feel valuable. and think about whether or not you really have a choice not to do them. And then think about what you aren't available for when you're in pursuit of that sense of value. When you're locked into constantly replenishing or searching for your sense of value, you must, no matter what, fill those buckets. I think of it as like this is the description of being a workaholic, right? Or of being someone who can't stop volunteering their time, and yet they never use their talent for themselves. Or of someone who finds so much value in taking care of others, they don't take good care of themselves. Or a person who thinks their intellect is what makes them special, and so when they're in the company of others, all they can talk about are the things they study and know a ton about, and they can't really put themselves in someone else's world. How do you remain open and welcoming to all that life is offering you if you're on a singularly focused mission to prove to yourself that you have value? This place becomes non-negotiable. It's rigid, it holds you hostage, and you probably don't even recognize it until you're burnt out or the jig is up and it doesn't work anymore. I think this is what happens a lot of times in relationships. We keep trying to prove that we're capable and competent and lovable and that we have something to offer that someone else will place a value on, only to find out eventually that they didn't value it to begin with, or they came to not value it anymore and something different, and we're locked into doing the same thing over and over, making the offering and afraid that if we change it, it'll rock the relationship. I feel like these things go on all the time. I'm kind of hoping that while you're over there in your living room or driving in your car, that you're thinking about some examples from your life too, either the ones that came from you when you were in that hot pursuit, or from people that you've tried to be in relationship with who were so busy trying to fill that sense of value that they weren't as available as they could have been. So in this moment, think about what you do that makes you feel good about yourself. How do you serve up and sell these valuable aspects of yourself and then get locked in to continuing to deliver them? And here's the real question. Do you have a choice in your belly not to do it? Okay, so how do you work your way out of this value-driven mission? Well, what you want to do is reverse this filling of the bucket by pursuing things from the place of curiosity, where you're actually discovering the value of it to you, not seeking to be valued by it, not using it to distinguish things specifically of worth. So then you come from this place of having value simply because you breathe, and it fills you up. You see, we don't actually realize that with every one of those gifts and abilities or moments of proving that we're valuable, that actually get in that bucket, we're undoing ourselves. The bucket filling, it does help us a little because we're experimenting with our talents. I mentioned this earlier, right? Like you do build a sense of yourself and you discover what you can do. But once you look in on it and you claim it as a valuable quality, you lose the ability to keep experimenting, to keep testing your own capacities, because it's now of the foundation of this reinforcing like value loop, the formula that you've like latched onto and depend upon to feel good about yourself. So we want to learn to depend on ourselves, not because we're proving our value, rather because we're building our sense of self as substantive and strong. I'd be really interested if anybody would talk to me about how you try to prove that to yourself. I'm going to give the number one more time, 202-570-7057. And I definitely I could talk about this stuff for hours. So it's okay if we don't have anyone call in, but I do want to give you an opportunity to do that because I just feel like it helps it integrate just a little bit easier for us. So imagine, back to the conversation, imagine that every action, every so-called talent and untalent is simply you experiencing being in life. And the meaning and the proving just goes away. What would life feel like then? So before we dive into what there is to see beneath this search for value, I'd like you to say right along with me, because this is what we've been building to. Ready? Okay, everybody ready? I have value simply because I breathe. And notice what happens in your body and your psyche when you speak those words. I have value simply because I breathe. I really love speaking words that I may not embody yet, but they help me to notice when my whole body resonates with them. And so I'm hoping you got to notice something when you spoke them. Okay, big deep breath. Here we go. So the big question is, why did it all get started anyway? Now, I did talk a little bit about going into your past, those parents and people in your life trying to help you get shaped and formed and the experiences that you went through. But what lives underneath all of that bucket filling and trying to prove your value in the way that I've been discussing? It's the essential needs, baby. Yep, that's what it is. These 5 essential needs. Now, again, I'm talking about one right now, which is this idea of value. These needs are lurking and exerting influence and controlling and determining much of what you're focusing on in your life right now. And guess what? Most of the time, we don't know it. Your inner world is where the best, most potent treasure is found. It's where your power originates and your inner resources are kept. But trying to pinpoint where your value lies and then trying to do more of it so you get to feel self-worth, it unfortunately doesn't directly help you find your power or get your needs met. In fact, it creates a vulnerable framework that at any point can tumble if those valued skills and talents just don't carry the day. So given this, your inside self totally benefits from a much more straightforward way of nurturing it. And it starts with understanding how you connect with your needs and the way they did or didn't get met. Needs are, for the most part, not something I think most of us want to acknowledge. They make us feel weak and soft and, well, needy, right? Needy is not considered the best thing by most, but they also run everything. They function like this engine in the background, like a generator for most of our thoughts and our actions. Every bit of doing we engage in is driven by needs. So this next thing is that I'm going to say is at the crux of it all. Because every bit of doing in our life and every action we take is driven by having need. We pin our sense of self on the outcomes of all of this doing, the filling of the buckets to be valuable, when really all we're trying to do is get these very valid, central to being human needs met. Think about that. We're spending all this time trying to get valuable when really what's underneath it is we're just trying to get our needs met. So you might say, oh, sure, I think we can all acknowledge physical needs, right? Like sustenance, food, sleep. Although I think that one we try to cheat on quite a bit, and shelter. But I don't think we spend near enough time on the needs of being, come with our being human. Because they tend to be emotional in nature, and they have everything to do with our innate sense of well-being and our wholeness and our personal sense of fulfillment. I kid you not, in every single conversation about living life that I've been in, like getting stuff done and managing relationships, making a living, it's been apparent to me that there was a deeper need driving the show for that person that unconsciously influenced their actions. Their raison d'etre, something they were trying to get for themselves that was deep, that they might have lost connection with. And driving, right, is the key word here. Because if you think about it, there's no reason we'd work so hard or with such fierce intention unless there was a true, demanding, pulsing need fueling the energy and force that we're bringing to it. And the force, it's important to acknowledge as it's true, it's real, right? It's that push inside your belly, that drive. Because I don't think most of us really distinguish this for what it is. Instead, we call it drive or passion or intention. But it is filling something, or it wouldn't have to come off with so much determination. So here's a couple more questions. What do you think you need to be fulfilled? What needs beyond food and shelter and sleep drive the way you run your life? Here's a harder one. Are you in touch with the true sensory feel of feeling or having need? Something you really must have. So I've distilled these 5 needs, these essential needs, as operating beneath all others at the human being level. And by understanding the role these needs cause in our everyday activity, we're able to stop being held hostage by them. And we can more directly create relationships and a foundation for living that more readily acknowledges them. When we aren't conscious about the needs driving us, there's a disconnect between the intensity with which we push or demand and expect and feel desperate about getting results. So, all right, it looks like we've got a caller, and I was just about to take callers again. So I'm going to, it looks like I've got somebody who's coming on, Diane, and I'm looking forward to talking to you about needs.
Am I on?
You sure are, Diane. What would you like to talk about? We're in the conversation about valuing ourselves.
I know. I've been listening to you. And so I have a question because it happens to me frequently. I don't know when I feel like I am asking for something, and if I feel like in the moment that I need something, and it doesn't come together the way I would like it to, what are some of the questions that I could ask myself in the moment to be able to identify or grab a hold of the idea of what my actual need is? Not what I think it might be, but how can I target it to get a little closer?
Well, it's a great question, and it's so practical because really all that I'm talking about is kind of conceptual, but really bringing it into everyday life is the point of it all, right? I think the most important thing is to get very clear about what it is that you're trying to feel successful in, like how you're going to end up getting to feel valuable if this thing that you're trying to get done happens. Mm-hmm. Because the holding on in some ways is more powerful and demanding with us than the actual search to go find what our real need is. Mm-hmm. So if you can hold of that and say, wait a minute, what am I trying to fill here? How am I trying to get valuable for myself? Then you can drop into the next place, which is, what is it? What is it that my deeper need is here around my sense of self? Am I needing to feel valuable? Am I needing to feel worthy? Am I trying to get acceptable? And just by asking that question, really going to open up, because the psyche responds to questions. It looks at it and says, oh, in this case, Diane wants to know what I really think about this. So if you can grab a hold of the moment and get yourself unattached to this must go the way I'm expecting, it's got to get done. Remember that drive I was talking about and that mission? And if you can back away from that, you're going to be in a position to then say, okay, what deeper need is really going on for me?
And what would you do if there was another person in that space? Would you just kind of back off? Would you say, hold on just a minute, let me think about this? Or would you continue on and do your work after the fact?
All of those 3 are possible. We have to find ways to give ourselves room to work. And I think the idea is to be conscious first. Actions that get taken to me are oftentimes very secondary, because what matters most is that you grabbed it, you interrupted the programming that you're working off of. And when the interruption of that, you're already halfway into new territory.
Okay. That's a good answer. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks for calling in. It's nice to hear from you again this week.
Okay. Bye-bye.
All right. So, I think just as we hit this spot, I was about to share with you the 5 essential needs I've been talking about through this whole thing. So what I'd like to do is I'm going to save those. We get on the other side of our next break. And so I'm hoping when you return, you'll be like, okay, I'm trying to figure them out myself. See how in sync you are with me.
The best of holistic, spiritual, and conscious world. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Brought to you by CDC and the Ad Council.
With so much loss, you may feel like you can't handle it all. Meditation or other spiritual practices can help you feel more grounded and better able to cope.
Find more self-care and coping tips at coping-19.org.
Ascending Hearts is no ordinary dating site, but a spiritual dating site with a purpose, to link you with your soulmate. We engineer the serendipity so you can trust that you will attune with someone that has the same matching vibration as you. Ascending Hearts, the conscious dating site for the spiritually aware. Try Ascending Hearts for free. ascendinghearts.com.
Imagine yourself being transported to India, to the banks of the Ganga and an ashram in Rishikesh. Visualize that you are welcome to satsang with an American sannyasi who shares the wisdom of her guru. Your visualization has manifested. Join Sattvi Bhagawati Saraswati for inspiration and transformation every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio.
We've all felt left out. And for people who move to this country, that feeling lasts more than a moment. We can change that. Learn how at belongingbeginswithus.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
So I'm Sam Parrotto, and you're listening to Expedition Self. And we are having one hefty conversation here about the need to feel valuable. In fact, I hope for all of you who are listening that you're not like, oh my gosh, there's so much chalked into this conversation, but I really feel like it's so important to all of us if we're going to begin to operate more free and creative way in life. So the number, if you're interested in calling in, is 202-570-7057. And before we went on to break, I mentioned that I was going to talk about, or at least give you the list of the 5 essential needs that I are beneath every single thing that we ever do in life. So the first one is safety. And I don't just mean physical safety, I mean emotional safety. And the second one is loved. The third one is acceptance, or to be acceptable. The fourth is valuable. And the fifth is worthy, or having worth. So I normally build this conversation beginning with safety first, but I thought since I was starting with my mantra about having value simply because you breathe, that we'd go a bit deeper into value as a need rather than the fix. Because what I've been talking about up to this moment is how we wire ourselves up to get to it as a fix. And that fix actually puts us in a position where it's on shaky ground, because it's built on identifying specific things that you can feel valuable about rather than coming from a place of deep value. So value is conditioned on the way in which I perform or the way in which I contribute something, right? That's the fix part, right? Most of us are trying to carve it out to identify and distinguish it. But if you think about it, what really makes you feel valuable? and valued. What really makes you feel valued is someone listening and paying attention. It's your needs mattering, the things you think and that you feel, someone wanting to know more about you. It's being seen as a treasure, something of great worth, so much so that when you're present, you're noticed and you feel as if you are someone of interest. But it got distorted growing up because it likely got tied to a certain way that you participated with others, right? Or a certain way that you were seen having a particular talent or a special gift. And for many of us, all of who we are, our thoughts and feelings and ways of behaviors, they didn't get treated like the most important thing to those around us. We didn't feel treasured for all of that. We didn't get listened to. Being listened to in the way I mean it was probably not so present. I'm not saying you didn't get it sometimes. Our need is gigantic, right? We're human beings. We have a need to be connected with and engaged with and feel like we're one people. But, a lot of times the people we spend our lives with, they're really not able to provide that. So we have to figure out how to fill this missing need of being really paid attention to and understood and listened to. I'm going to say that again because I really want you to get this. We had to figure out how to fill this missing need. So you see, it's the need first. And then that way we would get paid attention. We would get listened to. You're starting to put the pieces together that those things that you feel valued by were a way, a mechanism to get that. So we defaulted to this misperception that there are things about me that should be valuable. Or the idea that because I have some gift or some talent or some particular manner that I should have some intrinsic value. So my need to be valuable has to get met. I had to find a way to justify why I should be valued. And this is the part I think we don't like to be true about needs. They have to get met. Whether you do it directly or indirectly, your life is a big process of trying to figure out how to get those needs met. So now I walk around the world buying this idea that I've got to figure out some way to get my needs met. And this is what's underneath all of that bucket filling I talked about earlier. That's what I think a lot of us think of when we think of conditional love, because it's conditioned on us being a certain way. If I do these things and I offer these aspects of myself up, then I'm going to have value. Value within the self is most associated with this sense of being, like how I walk in the world, or how I believe I'm deserving of others noticing and responding to me. So how do we do this for ourselves? Right? To feel counted as wanted, chosen, and included. Because when we attach our sense of value to something, we're giving up pieces of our whole selves, even if in the moment it makes us feel good and skilled and accomplished. Yeah, I am saying that. Like, you get to feel good for that part of it, but you don't drop into this need. And of course, the thing about the need is this place where you don't actually feel strong and powerful. It's a place where you're not even sure how to fill that, right? So the key, how do we separate the pleasure of understanding what adds value in our lives without deteriorating our own sense of value? Because then our goal can be to see it and appreciate it and understand it and to watch it at play without having to be held hostage to it or by it. So can you see where valuing all things and looking for the innate intrinsic value, that it has so much great power for us? Because then we also get to gift it to others. We get to relate to them as innately valuable. We get to think, I can value everything about me, the stuff that's good and the stuff that's not good. And I can know that my contribution that I'm making, whether it's more or whether it's less, that I can still appreciate me for simply existing inside of what happened or got given. It is a bit of a human trap when I want to make a contribution, to be valuable, and then the more I am, the more I can be reinforcing that I have this value. But if I take the case that I have value simply because I'm me, that really my need to feel valued was legitimate and valid and important, that I'm here and I'm being, then these acts and these gifts and the effort aren't filled with filling up my sense of self. Because I'm now recognizing that need directly, and I'm willing to be vulnerable with it. I'm willing to soften into it. And I have a ton more freedom, my favorite word, to enjoy my efforts and fail at them, which basically gives me the ultimate freedom to experiment, be creative, and try the unexpected and the unplanned. So how do you get deeper into yourself and just be with your lack of value in the way you define it? That's kind of what I was saying to Diane when she posed her question. To really tackle the essential need of value, we have to give up what we've acquired along the way to reinforce this sense of value. You have to start intentionally making mistakes. Choose places where you're willing to allow the outcome to be different than you'd normally be satisfied with. You want to drop into actually feeling the need valuable in your body directly and specifically rather than feeding it. Feeling confident is totally overrated. It's like you have to sit back on your heels and work from a very different place. You have to say to yourself, I don't want to keep doing that false sense of value. I want to go to where the real heart of it is. What does it feel like to not be confident? Have you ever allowed yourself to feel like this? I'm not saying that you've ever been in a moment where you didn't, but I'm saying where you actually allowed yourself to feel it. And then you have to find the origins of how your need for being valued got filled. What were the specific stories from your life when you didn't feel valued? How did your specific gifts or actions get played up or down? And what were you left with? And when did you listen to? Really listened. Really, like somebody was being with you. So that the things you spoke, both directly and through your actions, were taken seriously by the people around you. And yourself. We want to go back and we want to really define and understand what was missing inside of that experience of being loved and cared for and seen and appreciated and acknowledged. And then we want to understand what we're actually trying to do for ourselves. So I hope you're hanging with me. I feel like I've been kind of layering up. Remember in the beginning when I said we're going to layer one idea on top of another idea on top of another idea, but your psyche is going to know where it's supposed to land. So this is where the big payoff can come. Because when we see how we're trying to compensate and fill those buckets for ourselves, we also see how we're relating to others in the exact same way. Our kids, our significant others, our family members, our coworkers, our friends, our community, right? And when we do that, we see that we're not really listening to them. That the same listening you would have wanted, it isn't possible to provide it to others until you really source and see and connect with those needs driving you. So who doesn't want to get to a place where you're more able to relate, to be connected, to listen, to bring a quality of openness and honesty, right? That you're able to actually be someone who can bring that to the world. But this is it. Everything I've said this whole time is actually what you have to do with you. Every bit has something to do with how do you listen to yourself. When you listen, are you actually evaluating and assessing what has value about you and what doesn't? Are you in a place that when you go inside, that you yourself don't give or don't meet that need that wasn't met as you were growing up? And really, here would be the question, where do you treat yourself as though you don't have value simply because you breathe? So this has been a really giant conversation, and I want to just take a moment and a couple of breaths to just slow down here, because when I talked about those other essential needs, they do all overlap. They fold in together. This idea of how do I feel emotionally safe? Well, when you're assessing what has value and what doesn't, you are not being emotionally safe for yourself. Or this idea of what makes me feel loved. And I think about the need to be loved, or to, that need is all tied to whether or not I am actually feeling seen, acknowledged, and noticed and cared for. So you can see that these 5 core needs, the more we can break them up and understand them, the more they all begin to work together. And as they work together, then we realize that the core need of being human is all about attention. It's all about caring. And it's all about our capacity to treat ourselves and accept ourselves as the whole human beings that we really are. So next week, when we come to the show, I'm going to be talking about intimacy with our significant relationships. And so just as a setup for that, I want to build off of this idea of where I have value and how I value myself, and how that plays a role when I'm talking about being intimate and connected with others. Now, by the way, I'm not talking about intimate relationships that are like have sex and romance and all that. I'm talking about any important relationship. And the most important one that you'll ever have is that one with you. So the more we pay attention and come to understand and get conscious of the way we're relating to ourselves. So today we focus on the idea that we have needs, and that these needs are super compelling. They drive us hard, and they set us off on a mission, and we don't acknowledge and recognize them, and we're not willing to be vulnerable in them. That all of that translates to the amount of content and richness that we actually bring to being in relationship with other people, and with life, and with our goals, and with the things that are part of our mission and our expression. So we're tying these one week to the next, and I hope it's starting to make some sense to you, even though each of these shows is a standalone one to talk about going inside. They really are building on each other as well. So I look forward to talking about intimacy and significant relationships next week. I do have a poem for us today, and it's from a blog called Poetry. And the person who wrote it is Nikita Gill. And I just thought it was perfect. So here goes. You are not small. You are not unworthy. You are not insignificant. The universe wove you from a constellation, just so atom. Every fiber in you comes from a different star. Together, you are bound by stardust, altogether spectacularly created by the energy of the universe itself. And that, my darling, is the poetry of physics, the poetry of you. I just thought this was so perfect for our conversation today, as we try to shift from filling the bucket, having the things come out of the bucket, getting more clear that we're really being driven by our need for value, and starting to interrupt and interfere with the way that we've collected our sense of value. Thank you for being here with me, and I hope that you get closer and closer to calling in and actually chatting with me about these subjects. You can also go to samparrotto.com and I share some resources and the poems on my website every week, with the idea that over time you're going to find the conversation about going inside to be compelling and interesting and inspiring. So thank you so much for being here today. And on that note, I will wish you a wonderful and cool St. Patrick's Day.